Some brands transcend being mere products. They become belief systems. Volvo is exactly that kind of brand. For decades, Volvo redefined what a car could mean. Not speed, but safety. Not glamour, but durability. Many people saw a Volvo not just as a car, but as armor, protecting their family from the world. But does that Volvo still exist today? Or has something else taken its place? Something that carries the logo, but lost the soul long ago? The answer to that question begins in 1927, in the Swedish city of Gothenburg.
Two engineers, Assar Gabrielsson and Gustaf Larsson, want to build a car that can survive Swedish roads. In the 1920s, Swedish roads are among the harshest, most unforgiving in Europe. The elegance of German engineering and the style of French automobiles are useless here. Here, you need to survive. Volvo means I roll, derived from the rotational motion of a bearing, a humble name for a humble beginning. The first car is the OV4, nicknamed Jacob by the public. It's open-topped, four-cylinder, and unremarkable to look at, but it is solid, and that quality will define the next century of Volvo's existence. Behind the company stands a financial force, SKF, one of the world's leading bearing manufacturers. Without that backing, Volvo likely never would have been born, but without the vision of Gabrielsson and Larsson, it wouldn't have meant anything either. The 1930s and 1940s, war, survival, and the construction of an identity. World War II cannot stop Volvo. Sweden remains neutral, and Volvo continues producing both civilian and military vehicles. The war years sharpen the company's engineering discipline. Scarcity breeds creativity. Volvo also enters truck and bus production during this period, a diversification that will prove life-saving later on. But what matters most in these years is an idea that embeds itself deep in the company's culture. A car must first be safe. Above all else, safe. That idea will crystallize into a historic decision in 1959.
1959, the most important automotive invention in history. Volvo safety engineer Niels Bohlin invents the three-point seatbelt, that simple-looking, life-saving device that billions of people fasten every single day. And what does Volvo do? It opens the patent to everyone, including competitors. Instead of making money, it chooses to keep people alive. Think about that. In today's business world, that decision sounds incomprehensible. But for Volvo, it made sense because Volvo was a safety company, and that decision elevated the brand's reputation to a level no amount of money could buy. The three-point seatbelt is estimated to have saved more than 1 million lives to date.
The 1960s and 1970s conquering America. From the late 1950s onward, Volvo makes serious investments in the American market. And here's the interesting thing. What Volvo sells to America is not a car. What Volvo sells to America is a life philosophy. In the 1960s and 1970s, a certain segment of the American middle class is tired of the Cadillac's excess and the Mustang's noise. These people want something different, quiet but solid, unpretentious but reliable. Not what everyone else is buying, but something that feels like their own choice. And Volvo fills that gap precisely. Volvo's American advertising produces some of the boldest marketing copy of the era. One ad reads, "This car will not save you, but it will make it harder for you to die." Another ad describes the Volvo buyer this way: "People who buy Volvos don't buy them to impress anyone." It reads like a confession, and that's exactly why it works. By the late 1970s, Volvo becomes one of the best-selling imported car brands in America. Explaining the history of giants like Volvo requires hours of dedicated research. If you appreciate the effort behind these stories, please consider subscribing to join our journey. Thank you. 1974. Safety engineering taken to the next level. Volvo launches the 240 series. This car becomes a legend. Why? Because it simply refuses to die. The 240 series is one of the longest produced and longest surviving cars in automotive history. Some examples are still running today. The body is boxy. The lines are clean and simple. The design generates no excitement. But the passenger cell inside forms one of the strongest safety structures of its era. In a collision, the 240's body crushes deliberately at specific points, absorbing energy and protecting the survival space. This is called a crumple zone design.
Volvo was among the first to bring this feature to mass production, and it is now found in every modern car on the road. People who bought the 240 weren't looking for aesthetics. They were buying something deeper: trust.
The 1980s, climbing toward the peak. With the 700 series, Volvo moves slightly up market. The 740 and 760 demonstrate that Volvo can offer both safety and comfort. The company is growing. It has become Sweden's national pride. But inside the company, attention is also growing. On one side are the engineers, stronger, safer, more durable. On the other side is management, more profitable, faster growing, appealing to a broader market. This tension has not yet surfaced, but it has taken root.
1990 to 1993, one of history's strangest merger attempts. The early 1990s, Volvo's legendary CEO Per G. Gyllenhammar is on the verge of completing the project of his life, merging Volvo with Renault. Years of negotiations reach their peak in 1993. Logos appear side by side. The deal is about to be signed, but Swedish shareholders and mid-level managers revolt. The issue is not technical. It is identity. Renault at the time is owned by the French state. This is not a marriage, it is a surrender, they say. Gyllenhammar is forced to resign in the aftermath. The deal collapses, and Sweden chooses pride. But now pay attention to history's most bitter irony. The very shareholders who said, "We are free Swedes, we will not partner with the French" in 1993, quietly say yes just 6 years later when Ford comes knocking in 1999. Pride is no longer on the table, only cash flow is. The armor of the Swedish tank is pierced that day, not on the factory floor, but in the boardroom.
1999. Ford buys Volvo. Volvo Cars is sold to Ford Motor Company for $6.45 billion, one of the highest prices ever paid for an automotive brand up to that point. Ford's strategy is clear: the premier automotive group. Jaguar, Land Rover, Aston Martin, and now Volvo, all under one roof. Ford wants to gain power in the premium segment with these brands. Initially, many analysts find the sale logical. Volvo will benefit from Ford's deep pockets and global supply chain. Ford will benefit from Volvo's safety technology and brand reputation. But what actually happens? What actually happens is that Volvo slowly begins to stop being itself. The Ford era, identity erosion. Ford management wants to cut costs. That is understandable. But in doing so, it begins to sand down the very features that make Volvo what it is. Volvo models start sharing Ford platforms. The S40 sits on the Ford Focus platform. The V70 carries Ford Mondeo components. This is technically defensible, but Volvo customers feel it. Why doesn't this car feel like the old ones, they ask? Why does it feel less solid? The answer is simple: because it isn't quite as much a Volvo anymore. Beyond that, Volvo's design language changes during the Ford era. The angular, serious, uncompromising lines give way to a rounder, more global aesthetic. Volvo now wants to appeal to everyone, and a brand that tries to appeal to everyone eventually appeals to no one. 2008 to 2010, Ford's collapse and Volvo goes up for sale. The 2008 financial crisis shakes Ford to its foundations. The company must sell assets to survive. Jaguar and Land Rover go to India's Tata Motors. Aston Martin is handed to private investors, and Volvo goes up for sale. At this point, something interesting happens. Several American companies express interest. Some European groups explore options, but the strongest bid comes from an unexpected place, from China. 2010, Geely buys Volvo. Zhejiang Geely Holding Group acquires Volvo Cars for $1.8 billion. Ford paid $6.45 billion for it. Geely gets it for roughly a third of that price. This is not a bargain. It is a declaration of loss. At the time, Geely is nearly unknown in the West. It makes cheap, mid-segment cars, and now it owns one of the world's most storied safety brands. The world receives this news with skepticism. What will China do to Volvo, is the question asked everywhere. Geely's initial answer is remarkably smart. Nothing. Volvo is Volvo.
it will remain independent. And for the first few years, Geely actually keeps that promise. 2010 to 2015, an unexpected recovery. The first 5 years of the Geely era are, contrary to many analysts' expectations, quite good for Volvo. The company returns to engineering investments that were neglected during the Ford years. The SPA platform, scalable product architecture, is built as Volvo's own engineering foundation. The XC90, S90, V90, and XC60 are built on top of it, and these cars are genuinely good. The XC90 in particular draws attention. The new generation XC90, launched in 2015, achieves near-perfect scores in safety tests. The design is strong. The technology is advanced. Critics are impressed. Has Volvo returned? People ask. Perhaps, but the story is not over. 2016 to 2020, the weight of the Chinese market. There is a reason Geely invested in Volvo. The Chinese market. China is the world's largest automotive market, and China's upper middle class is looking for alternatives to German premium brands, BMW and Mercedes. Volvo is perfectly positioned to fill that gap. Scandinavian design, safety mythology, European heritage. Volvo opens production facilities in China. Special long wheelbase versions are produced for Chinese customers who prefer spacious rear seating. Sales explode in the short term. Volvo's global sales climb from roughly 370,000 units in 2010 to over 700,000 in 2019. The numbers are striking, but this growth comes at a cost. The identity question. Who is Volvo building cars for? Once upon a time, Volvo had a clear answer to this question. Cars for Swedish families. Cars for people who prioritize safety. But now, Volvo is trying to be too many things at once. A luxury status symbol for China's upper class. An electric future promise for European environmentalists. A big, powerful SUV for American drivers. A minimalist aesthetic experience for Scandinavian design enthusiasts. Trying to be this many things simultaneously risks becoming nothing in particular, and the most concrete reflection of this identity diffusion shows up in quality complaints. The durability question. Numbers and voices from the field. Volvo's reliability rankings have declined systematically over the past decade. J.D. Power, Consumer Reports, and various European reliability surveys consistently paint a similar picture. Volvo has moved from the extremely reliable category it once occupied to average. Electrical system issues, software glitches, and premature component fatigue are being reported. This is a problem specific to newer Volvos. Owners of old 240s or 740s tell stories of cars they drove for decades and sold still running. Owners of newer generation Volvos talk about service visits within the first few years. The difference is tangible, and it is not a coincidence. So what went wrong? First, platform sharing continues. Volvo now uses Geely's CMA platform in some of its models. This platform is also used for Geely's own brands and Lynk & Co vehicles. A Volvo and some Chinese cars share the same technical foundation. This is common practice in the auto industry, but whether it is compatible with Volvo's price tag is a legitimate debate. Second, the electric transition has been rushed. Volvo was among the first manufacturers to target going fully electric by 2030, a bold decision, but electric vehicles require far more complex software ecosystems than combustion cars, and Volvo's software engineering infrastructure has struggled to manage this transition. Software-related issues are being reported from vehicles. Third, the production geography has changed. Volvo no longer manufactures exclusively in Sweden. Production happens at plants in China, Belgium, and the United States. Maintaining consistent quality control across different geographies is extremely difficult, and this difficulty is showing up in the product. 2021, Volvo goes public. But where? Volvo Cars lists on the Stockholm Stock Exchange in 2021. This is a sign of success. The company has grown, it has gained value. But looking at the structure behind the listing reveals this. Geely retains the overwhelming majority of shares. Strategic decisions are still managed from Hangzhou, Geely's headquarters. Swedish Volvo has become a company whose name remains in Sweden, but whose heart beats in China. The Polestar paradox. The story of Polestar, Volvo's electric performance sub-brand, reads reads like a summary of Volvo's identity crisis. Polestar started as a pure Swedish performance brand. Then it was absorbed into Volvo. Then it was transformed into an electric brand together with Geely. Today, Polestar vehicles are manufactured in China, and the question of who Polestar is as unanswered as the question of who Volvo is.
Brand legacy. How much does a logo actually weigh? What is a person buying today when they buy a Volvo? Swedish engineering? Partly. Some cars are still designed in Gothenburg. Safety? Partly. Volvo's safety scores are still high. It still ranks near the top in NCAP tests. But that old durability, that feeling of this car will outlive me, this is where the answer becomes murky. A brand is worth the decisions standing behind its logo, not the logo itself. Volvo's logo has not changed, but the decisions standing behind it have changed fundamentally. Conclusion. Volvo is not a bad company, but being a good company does not protect you from making the wrong decisions. Volvo is, among other things, a casualty of globalization. It came into existence by doing one thing perfectly, then allowed that perfection to erode piece by piece under commercial pressure. During the Ford era, it became a victim of platform economics. During the Geely era, it became a victim of growing too fast and trying to appeal to too many markets at the same time. In 1959, when Niels Bohlin invented the seatbelt, Volvo gave that patent to the world for free because at that time, Volvo's priority was not money, it was people. Today, the question of what Volvo's priorities are can be answered fairly easily by looking at its sales strategy. The world loved Volvo, and Volvo could not manage the world's love. Success, if not managed wisely, becomes the very thing that kills you. Have you ever owned a Volvo? Did you notice a difference between older models and newer ones? Share in the comments.